So my name's Hugh Montgomery. I'm Professor of Intensive Care Medicine at University College London in Great Britain. I'm also a jobbing National Health Service doctor working in an intensive care unit. I do a lot of research, but I'm also very active in the climate space on the health impacts of climate change. I co-chair the Lancet Countdown on Health and Climate Change, which is an annual report authored by over 50 countries now.
What led you to converge the health with climate issues?
I discovered climate change largely by accident in the late 1990s when I was reading science in the big journals, Nature, Science and so forth. And these are a bit like I would say, a sort of scientific cosmopolitan. And there's one story next to something else. So I'd be reading molecular biology and there'd be something about gravitational waves or fossil hominids or climate change. And the climate change stories I saw looked very, very frightening. But it was a time when the press was saying there was no such thing or the world was getting colder. So I spent a few years trying to understand the climate science and realised we were in terrible trouble. And it wasn't just a story about tree frogs and polar bears, it was about humans.
Who is your target audience in terms of your messaging? Who is it that you generally are reaching out to?
We need to reach out to everybody so that they understand climate change. This has become viewed through a political lens or through a sociological one, that climate change is for beardy, weirdy tree huggers or whatever else. And we need everybody to understand that it's not. Because unless everybody understands it, we're locked into inaction. Governments won't act because they think businesses won't like it and the population won't vote for it. Businesses won't act because they say government won't legislate and people won't buy. People won't act because they say governments won't tell them what to do and that businesses don't give them a choice. And around the world, a business says, well, we won't act because someone will just offshore, and a government says we won't act because the government abroad won't act, and people say no point in me acting because someone in India or China won't act. So the answer is we've all got to get the message and we've all got to start working together to get this right. So we need to communicate the message broadly to everyone, from government to business to people like me.
Can I shift gears dramatically and talk about the amok?
Yes.
Consequences, and what do you think the consequences of the amok would be in terms of population health and certainly in terms of climate?
So the Atlantic Ridgel overturning circulation is a massive ocean circulation that carries colossal quantities of heat from the Pacific really up towards the Arctic, past us here in Britain to our west. And then that hot water cools and sinks and goes back. And if we melt lots of fresh water or fresh ice, it's less dense. And that stops sinking and that can start slowing and then switching off that circulation. And if we do, the consequences will be catastrophic to the Northern Hemisphere. It will give us very unstable weather patterns, increasing storms and rapid cooling, which will ultimately lead to very thick snow and ice in the winter and very high temperatures in the summer. So civilization as we know it in the Northern Hemisphere and our agriculture and so forth will be absolutely catastrophically impacted.
Can you talk about the metaphor that you use in terms of your medical work, working with, I guess, catastrophic situations and the climate itself? I thought that was very effective.
So I work in intensive care, which is where people are life-threateningly ill, and on average across the UK around 1/4 of patients coming in to intensive care as an emergency will die. And we see people in the emergency departments too. So we as doctors understand how you respond to an emergency. And you respond, firstly, with speed. You don't sit around. Secondly, you do what's necessary, but you also do what's sufficient. Those are the key bits in medical practice. So you decide what is it this person needs, and then you give them enough of it. So let's suppose someone's bleeding out. You put a tourniquet on the bleeding point, and then you say, well, what's necessary is blood, so you give them that. And what's sufficient, they might need 6 units of it. But what you don't do is not turn up late, maybe not apply a tourniquet, and then if you decide they need some blood, give them half a unit instead of the 6 they need. So we've treated the climate crisis, and we've called it an emergency, and we've treated it with homeopathy. It's not good enough.
So how does that land when you use this metaphor? Does it sink in with people?
I think these sort of metaphors do help people understand, but of course what you've then got to do is explain to them that this is an emergency and why it is, but then also tell them what it is that they can do. Because if I tell you someone's bleeding out here and you're a filmmaker, not a doctor, you're not going to know what to do. So I need to say, this is an emergency, together we can deal with this, and here are the things that you can do. And just as I would do that now, if we were facing an emergency where we're filming today, in the climate world, that's what we need to do. People need to be told this is a crisis, and then told, and now, if you want to fix the problem, here are the things you can do here and now.
We spoke earlier about your work with youth and children. Could you just talk about why you got involved in that, what the importance of that is?
When I first came across climate change and realised it was a crisis, I knew that we needed to change behaviours of adults, and I didn't know how to do that. So I went to a very famous creative in advertising, and I said to him, you're good at this, right? You're good at getting people to buy stuff they don't want to buy, changing behaviours. How are we going to do this? And he, like all good gurus, sent me away with a whole lot of books and said, come back and tell me the answer. And the answer is, you speak to young people. And the reason is, if you go to adults, we've got entrenched behaviours. We're very hard to change. And our behaviours are really difficult to change, where the things we're doing now are pleasurable, and they're associated with some sort of indeterminate risk in the medium term. So in medical world, unprotected sex, alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, for many people are pleasurable now. They've got some sort of risk down the line, but they're not going to stop doing them now because they're quite pleasurable. Very hard to move an adult. Children and young people are much more flexible in their thinking, and furthermore, they're very, very good at changing grown-ups' behaviours. A daughter, for instance, is about 7 times more effective than a random stranger in getting a father to stop smoking. And that's partly because they nag all the time, but it's partly also because they personalise the message. Rather than saying you should stop smoking because it's giving you a 2.7-fold increased risk of bronchogenic carcinoma, a daughter will say, Daddy, please don't smoke because I don't want you to die and leave me without a daddy. So children and young people are very effective, and they're so effective, in fact, that there's a ban in Britain on advertising grown-up products to children because they're so good at getting adults to change what they do. So children and young people have enormous power. And actually, furthermore, if they turned out and voted as young people, they could change the political landscape on this too. They've got huge agency.
Is there a message that you can think of speaking directly to youth aged, like 12 to 18 or something like that?
If I were to put a message out to young people, let's say 12 to 18-year-olds, the message I put out genuinely is, you can fix this problem. It's not your fault. It's our fault. We have got you into this situation. But the good news is you can fix it. You have enormous power. You have power over the grown-ups around you. Political parties are scared of you because you can change the world with your votes when you get to be 18. You can change the purchasing power of your parents and those around you, your teachers, your relatives, your next-door neighbours, and you have spending power yourself. And actually, the markets follow the money. So you take actions, you make it clear that this is important to you, and the world will change around you. You have enormous power.
On a personal level, what are your thoughts? What keeps you awake at night, or what lets you sleep? What are your thoughts about where we're going?
The climate crisis genuinely does keep me awake at night, and it wakes me up at night. I am frankly terrified. I'm terrified, and I'm 63 years old now, and this is coming to get me at my age. I'm terrified for my son, who was 20 years old only 2 weeks ago. He's in terrible trouble. That's what keeps me awake. What gives me joy and hope is that the people who are addressing this problem are good people. They are smart, intelligent, motivated, good people to be around, and they're a clan to join. So if you are watching this and you're feeling disempowered and frightened, I feel frightened too, but you can overcome that by action. Action dispels fear. Join those other people and take action, and you will feel better for it, and you'll sleep better.
That's great. Thanks. I've got lots more stuff